As my eyes opened, I realized I was laying in a bloody puddle on the sidewalk below. Cassie's shattered window was just above me, the whole incident with Sergeant Death having only happened minutes ago. I was no longer bleeding, and in fact I had been fully healed. But what got to me was the fact that I was a bit more muscular, and my newfound powers were still with me. "Whoa," I sounded off, standing up. "I can't believe it." At that very moment, my feet left the ground as I levitated upwards, high above the rooftops of the apartment building. "I'll make this right," I promised Cassie, staring down at her window as police arrived on the scene below. I simply took off, flying across the city of Chicago in search of a few materials for my new identity. It didn't take long for me to find what I needed, just a simple piece of white material that I cut and sewed into a mask that covered my entire head. I used my white eyes to burn holes so that I could see, and then I cut a section out for my mouth and chin to hang free. I didn't bother with changing my clothes. The rest of the outfit could come later, after I had found and defeated my foe. That was where things got tricky, actually finding him. He could be anywhere in the city, or the country for that matter. Sure, it had only been an hour since he threw me through the window, but with the superpowers at his disposal, he could travel much faster than any normal man or man-made transportation. Was there even a way for me to find him? He had been the one to find me first last time, due to my obvious attempt to follow him. But giving up wasn't an option anymore. The day I would stand by and feel too weak to protect others had passed, and I had been reborn. The thought of Cassie and my mother repeated in my mind, refusing to be forgotten. I wrestled with those demons as I stood atop the roof of a smaller building, searching the several alleyways nearby. It wasn't long before I heard the screams of a teenage boy and spotted him running out the alleyway below and into the street. Following him was a larger man wearing a hooded sweatshirt and roughed-up jeans. "Time to start the new job," I murmured, hopping off the edge and into the street behind them. "Hey, what do you think you're doing chasing a kid?" The man completely ignored me, which wasn't a problem. It only meant that things were going to be more painful for him than they had to be. With a shrug, I lunged forward, fast enough to cover the 20 yards between us in only a few seconds. I tackled him head-on and smashed his body into the cold concrete. When he struggled, I quickly made my super strength obvious by punching his shoulder hard enough to make it numb. "You're done," I told him sternly. "Giving up now will save your other shoulder." "Who are you?" The man shuddered as he remained on his back. "I'm the guy who stops guys like you," I told him, feeling a little simple. "Now tell me what you were doing chasing the boy." "His name is Kyle Edgman," the man explained, pulling himself to his knees. "His family is full of politicians and lawyers, more like puppet masters and con men. They found all of their good fortunes from General Edgman, the kid's grandfather. He was alone, but I wasn't going to kill him. I'm sure he had a few $100s in his wallet. Guy like me could use that money more than him." "Nothing justifies what you were really doing." I glared down at him, my wide eyes beginning to glow. "You're a filthy, common mugger." "Crap, you're the second new super guy I've seen tonight," the crook said with absolute terror. "Please don't kill—" "I'm not going to kill you," I growled in his face, pulling him closer. "But I will break bones if you don't stop the life you're living. Now tell me who's this other super guy." "No problem, man," he huffed, still afraid. "I'll tell you. He was a guy dressed in army shades. Highly decorated, I might add." "That's him," I whispered to myself, anxious to hear more. "Did you meet him face to face?" The man shook his head. "Nuh-uh. He came to a monthly gathering I go to in the outskirts of town. Said that if we didn't go out tonight and commit a crime, he'd kill us. We didn't believe him until he ate my pal Esteban's soul. That was when we all scattered, racing to save our own necks and do as we were told." "He's very dangerous," I said with an angry nod. "But I plan to stop him." "Stop him?" the crook shrieked. "How do you plan to stop such a strong guy like—" "With my fists," I answered him, finished with the discussion. "Which direction was your little meeting? That way, he told me, pointing. East. I grunted. You've been pleasant. And with a quick elbow to the side of his head, he was unconscious. As I set him on his back, I levitated upwards, high above the roofs of all the nearby buildings. I was determined, no, driven, to find this man. It took me a mere hour to stumble upon a victimized gathering of frightened, screaming people at what appeared to be the park. I hadn't even reached the outskirts of Chicago yet. As my feet touched the grass, I noticed the remains of what must have been a stage with a few smashed instruments and chairs. From the look of things, Sergeant Death had just been here, given the fact that blood was splattered everywhere and people were running for their lives. Dead bodies of entire families littered what must have been the seating for the audience. It disgusted me to see that there were easily 500 people here, not counting the 100 corpses on the ground. I raised a few feet into the air above the swarming crowd and looked in every direction possible. "Damn it!" I cursed, turning my head from left to right. "Where are you? There's no way you're already gone." "Please!" I heard a woman shriek, and my head snapped to the right, peering down into the crowd. I saw a heavy-set, middle-aged woman struggling to run through the crowd. As I noticed she was chasing rather than fleeing, I turned my attention ahead of her. What I saw was horrific. With Sergeant Death holding a small child in his hands like a football, running from the woman that must have been the mother. "No, please, no!" she screamed frantically, bursting with tears. "Don't hurt my boy!" I immediately soared towards the vile villain, ready to pound his skull into his spine. He never even saw me coming as I flew up behind him and swung a good right hand into the back of his head. I quickly reached out to catch the crying boy, as Sergeant Death dropped him, stumbling forward. Once I set the boy down, I lunged forward, hoping to still catch my foe off his guard. Of course, he came to a stop and quickly turned around to see me. But as his eyes widened upon seeing me, I drove a hellacious knee into his gut, followed by a thunderous elbow to his temple. Sergeant Death literally crumbled, ending up on his back before me. "How could you?" I snarled at him, raising my fists as the woman grabbed her boy and took off in the opposite direction. The boy was hardly 5 years old. "Why do I do anything?" he asked me in response, slowly getting back up. "It was good sport." "Good sport?" I pointed at him with a fiery finger. I wasted no more words, instead smashing my knee into his face, pushing him several yards onto his back. I hopped backwards and watched him, giving the maniac every chance to get up and fully feel what I'd done to him. He remained on his back for a moment, choking up some blood before he rolled over onto his stomach. Then, he laughed. The sick freak laughed. "Somebody went and got them some superpowers," Sergeant Death joked, pulling to his knees with his face still buried in the dirt. "How many souls did you eat, Daniel?" "None," I spat in reply as he pushed up off the ground with his hands, eventually standing up. "And while my eyes may give my face away, this mask is the face you'll come to fear." "What are you supposed to be? A superhero?" he asked me curiously, tilting his head to the side. "Wait a minute," his eyes widened. "You really are. You're trying to be a superhero." Sergeant Death continued to laugh until he was bending over and holding his gut. I balled up my fists, annoyed and anxious to end this. This madman would be stopped here, one way or another. "A blank, white mask?" he giggled, slapping his knee. "I know it matches your eyes, but isn't that just silly?" "I represent eternal justice," I growled at him, standing my ground in the face of mockery. "For both this life and the next." "Really now?" Sergeant Death said, his laughter beginning to subside. "I guess I'll just have to see that for myself." The herd of screaming people around us began to thin out, as almost everyone had fled the park. Their horrified faces would forever be burned into my memory, just as Cassie's and my mother's had been. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he asked me, gesturing to the damage done to the park. "No," I shook my head. "It's awful." "You just have a weak stomach." Sergeant Death pointed a finger at me. "That's why you are weak. That's why your friend, along with so many others, have become a part of me." "Shut up!" I bellowed, racing forward. I quickly kicked him in the chest, forcing him to half fly, half roll to the area of the ruined stage. As he crashed into a set of instruments and equipment, I was already on my way to him, unrelenting in my mission. But instead, I stopped just a few short feet from him. He was on one knee, rubbing his chest where I'd kicked him. "Hurts, doesn't it?" I asked him in a stern tone, and he shook his head. "I must admit," the villain grunted, spitting more blood, "this power of yours is very impressive. You're lying when you say you didn't devour souls to gain it. There is no other way you could have suddenly acquired it." That's when I got to give him a smug smile, and said, "When you killed me, I was sent back to the other realm, or as the elders who spoke to me called it, the post-realm. They enlightened me to their ancient status as well as the power of Protector." "Protector?" Sergeant Death repeated in a dumb tone. "Protector of what?" My smile turned into a grin. "Of the realms," I answered him. Before he could say anything, I lunged forward, fist cocked back and ready to smash his face. "Oh, no you don't," Sergeant Death murmured, barely dodging my swing. "I'm not falling for that again." With a swift kick to my ankles, he brought me stumbling forward to one knee. As I turned around, my left cheek was met by his fist, drawing the taste of blood in my own mouth. I sensed him jump backwards and heard the ripping of lumber and metal. When I looked back over, my eyes widened. "Son of a..." A large chunk of the stage smashed into me before I could finish my sentence, pushing me several blocks back into the city. There were more people here, probably the same ones that had just escaped the park. I had been hoping to contain our carnage, but my doubts had proved me correct. Our battle was going to be remembered for a very long time. I slowly crawled out from under a section of the stage and looked around, pulling to my knees. So many scared faces of both children and adults stared at me, each one for only a moment before their race to safety brought them past me. The loud sounds of 2 feet crushing into the street stole my attention, forcing me to quickly jump to my own feet. I looked dead ahead to find my foe grinning at me. "You're pathetic," he mocked, taking a few slow steps forward. "And you're barbaric," I threw back at him, but the monster only laughed again. "I'm what this world has shaped me to be. Isn't that what we all are?" I snorted at his claim. "Then I suppose I was molded to stop you." "That's where you're wrong, Daniel," Sergeant Death said, shaking his head. "It's the fact that I'm barbaric and monstrous that will bring me delicious victory today." "I'm getting tired of your mouth," I replied sourly, stomping my way to him. Sergeant Death began to approach me as well. "Then shut me up!" We quickly reached one another, locking fingers as we attempted to outpower the other. "You think you're stronger than me?" Sergeant Death snarled in my face, baring his yellow teeth. "I know I'm not stronger than your breath," I mocked him. "That's the most dangerous thing about you." My enemy wasted no more time with words. Instead, the insult I paid him proved to be another mistake, as he kicked his knee upwards, straight into my jaw. We broke away from one another and he punched me in the face. I almost fell to one knee but returned with the fist of my own, breaking his nose. "Why you..." he groaned, holding a hand over his bleeding nose as he took a few steps backwards. Blood was already dripping between his fingers. "You'll pay for that!" "I doubt it," I grunted, hopping from one foot to the other with my fists raised. "But you're welcome to try." "I don't try, I do!" Sergeant Death howled, lunging towards me. I knew this would drag on forever if I didn't hit him with a game-changing attack, so instead of playing into his hopes of having another fistfight, I gathered my energy. When he was only moments away, I hit him with white electricity that shook his body. The villain shrieked in pain and I stopped, leaving him to fall to the ground. His skin was riddled with third-degree burns and I could tell it was painful to even move. "It's over," I told him, stopping where I was. Sergeant Death looked up at me from his knees and shook his head. "I'm not dead yet," he hissed at me, "and neither are you." I frowned. "Wouldn't you prefer to keep it that way?" Sergeant Death shook his head again, the agony on his face telling more than any scream could. "This world isn't big enough for the both of us. Deep down, you know that too." "No, I don't." I tried to lie and he spit blood at me. "After all the fun time we've shared and you can't be man enough to speak the truth." "Give it up," I urged him, desperate to end this. "We don't have to fight to the death. We can both walk away from this if you just shut your mouth!" The villain exploded with anger, throwing wild fists. "Our battle is a mortal one, demanding that only one of us walk away alive. You will fight me, Daniel." He almost caught me with a few good hooks, but I sent him backwards with a kick to the chest. As his back smacked the ground, he jumped back up, two dark spheres of energy forming in his hands. "Stop this!" I yelled at him, hoping that no one was close enough to be caught in our blast radius. "Just surrender!" "Never!" Sergeant Death roared, and I closed my eyes for one swift moment, taking in what I was about to do. With one quick motion, I shot two beams of white energy from my eyes. They pierced his chest, shredding his heart like tissue paper. The villain's eyes grew wide as blood almost immediately began to run from his chest. His attacks deteriorated, and he collapsed on his side, dead before he even hit the ground. I bowed my head shamefully, a little queasy after having been forced to take a man's life, regardless of how evil he'd been. But he had been hurting others, and gave me no other choice to stop it. As the calm set in, I noticed people exiting the buildings on both sides of the street. They were hesitant, but certain that things were over, slowly piling out of stores, barbershops, and other businesses. "Hey, mister?" I heard the soft voice of a child say, and I felt a tug on my sleeve as I looked down to see the same little boy I had saved earlier. His mother was only a few feet away, but too awestruck to say anything, only mouthed the words, "Thank you," as she shuddered. "Hey, mister?" the boy said again, and I looked into his green eyes. "Yes?" I murmured. "What's your name?" My name?" I spoke quietly with a dumb expression. "Daniel." "No," the boy huffed with a smile. "Your superhero name." I couldn't help but feel touched, seeing myself in the boy. I may not have had a superhero to save me when I was a child, but this one did. Every child from this day forward would. "Well?" the boy asked eagerly with another tug. "Afterlife," I told him, materializing into thin air. It had been nearly 7 years to the day since I had killed Sergeant Death, and strangely at the time had flown by unnoticed. I had grown both in strength and wisdom since then, remaining an active superhero for both Earth and the Post-Realm. With no disturbances in the Post-Realm, I had been able to dedicate all of my time and energy among the living, protecting any and all that cried out for peace. There were others like me in this world, other superheroes, but I was content with riding my path solo, free from the eventual agonies that we experience with friends and loved ones. Over the years, I gathered the rest of my costume, a simple white martial arts gi to match my mask and my eyes. Accompanying it was a pair of white boots, with a black stripe on each. While my heroic activities took place on Earth, I still took to spending my leisure time in the Post-Realm, resting my mind. Although I hardly took a break, I never spent too much time in one particular area or city. Instead, I traveled the planet, searching the lands for any who deserved my wrath. Currently, I was in Denver, Colorado, posted on the rooftop of a rather low building, peering down over the edge. My target was a group of young men emptying a truck full of enormous boxes, large enough that it took 2 of the 5 men just to carry one. My wide eye studied them intensely, searching for any sign of illegal activity. "They're clean. I've already checked them out," I heard a man's voice say, and I quickly turned around. I saw a dark-haired man dressed in a strange uniform, decorated by what appeared to be the universe itself, constellations and all. His yellow cape hung in the wind behind him, as his smile showed a mouth full of perfectly white teeth. "Who are you?" I asked suspiciously, keeping my energy ready for a moment's notice. "And how did you find me?" "I've kept a close eye on you," the Cape Crusader told me, smiling like a schoolboy. "You're a very powerful, quite noble man. I respect that." "You didn't tell me who you are," I growled at him, slightly annoyed with a vague response. The man wearing the universe raised his hands and showed me his palms. "Easy, I'm friendly. I go by the name of Captain Cosmos." Captain Cosmos. I repeated the very familiar name a few times, staring at the ground as I collected my thoughts. Then it hit me. "You're a superhero!" He only laughed. "Well, I'm known to be one, but I believe anyone with greater power must own a greater responsibility, regardless of what they call themselves." "I believe the same thing," I replied with a shrug, feeling awkward in the presence of a well-known warrior. Captain Cosmos simply smiled. "That's why I'm here. I must say you've changed in 7 years." I raised an eyebrow. "We've met before?" "My real name is Richard. Richard Spirit." "Daniel Edwards," I told him, reaching out to shake his hand. "Afterlife." "Well, Daniel," he said to me, still smiling big, "how would you like to be part of something bigger than both you and me alone?" I gave him a curious expression. "Like what?" My new friend's smile only widened, as he said, "Part of a team."